11. Establishment of permanent U.S. military bases in Iraq. In his conduct while President of the United States, George W. Bush, in violation of his constitutional oath to faithfully execute the office of President of the United States, and to the best of his ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional duty under Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution, to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, has violated an act of Congress that he himself signed into law by using public funds to construct permanent U.S. military bases in Iraq. On January 28, 2008, President George W. Bush signed into law the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2008, H.R. 4986, noting that the Act, quote, authorizes funding for the defense of the United States and its interests abroad, for military construction, and for national security-related energy programs. The President added the following signing statement, quote, excuse me, provisions of this Act, including Sections 841, 846, 1079, and 1222, purport to impose requirements that could inhibit the President's ability to carry out his constitutional obligations, to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, to protect national security, to supervise the executive branch, and to execute his authority as Commander-in-Chief. The executive branch shall construe such provisions in a manner consistent with the constitutional authority of the President. Now, Section 1222 clearly prohibits the expenditure of money for the purpose of establishing permanent U.S. military bases in Iraq. The construction of over $1 billion in U.S. military bases in Iraq, including runways for aircraft, continues despite congressional intent, as the administration intends to force upon the Iraqi government such terms which will assure that the bases remain open in Iraq. Iraqi officials have informed members of Congress in May 2008 of the strong opposition within the Iraqi parliament and throughout Iraq to the agreement that the administration is trying to negotiate with Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki. The agreement seeks to assure a long-term U.S. presence in Iraq, of which military bases are the most obvious, sufficient, and necessary construct, thus clearly define congressional intent as to the matter and meaning of permanency. In all these actions and decisions, President George W. Bush has acted in a manner contrary to his trust as President and Commander-in-Chief, and subversive of constitutional government, to the prejudice of the cause of law and justice, and to the manifest injury of the people of the United States. Wherefore, George W. Bush, by such conduct, is guilty of an impeachable offense warranting removal from office. Article 12. Initiating a war against Iraq for control of that nation's natural resources. In his conduct while President of the United States, George W. Bush, in violation of his constitutional oath to faithfully execute the office of President of the United States, and to the best of his ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and in violation of his constitutional duty under Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution, to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, has, both personally and acting through his agents and subordinates, together with the Vice President, invaded and occupied a foreign nation for the purpose, among other purposes, of seizing control of that nation's oil. The White House and its representatives in Iraq have, since the occupation of Baghdad began attempted to gain control of Iraqi oil. This effort has included pressuring the new Iraqi government to pass a so-called Hydrocarbon Act. Within weeks of the fall of Saddam Hussein in 2003, the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, awarded a $240 million contract to Bearing Point, a private U.S. company. A Bearing Point employee based in the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad was hired to advise the Iraqi Ministry of Oil on drawing up the new hydrocarbon law. The draft law places executives of foreign oil companies on a council with the task of approving their own contracts with Iraq. It denies the Iraqi National Oil Company exclusive rights for the exploration, development, production, transportation, and marketing of Iraqi oil, and allows foreign companies to control Iraqi oil fields containing 80% of Iraqi oil for up to 35 years through contracts that can remain secret for up to 2 months. The draft law itself contains secret appendices. President Bush provided unrelated reasons for the invasion of Iraq to the public in Congress, but those reasons have been established to have been categorically fraudulent, as evidenced by the herein mentioned articles of impeachment 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7. Parallel to the development of plans for war against Iraq, the U.S. State Department's Future of Iraq project began as early as April 2002, involved meetings in Washington and London of 17 working groups, each composed of 10 to 20 Iraqi exiles and international experts selected by the State Department. The Oil and Energy Working Group met 4 times between December 2002 and April 2003. Ibrahim Bar al-Ulum, later the Iraqi oil minister, was a member of the group, which concluded that Iraq, quote, should be opened to international oil companies as quickly as possible after the war, unquote, and that, quote, the country should establish a conducive business environment to attract investment of oil and gas resources, unquote. The same group recommended production sharing agreements with foreign oil companies, the same approach found in the draft hydrocarbon law being promoted by the Bush administration, and also they recommended control over Iraq's oil resources. Now, this control over Iraq's oil resources remains a prime objective of the Bush administration. I want to go back and read this for clarification. The same group recommended production sharing agreements with foreign oil companies, the same approach found in the draft hydrocarbon law, and control over Iraq's oil resources remains a prime objective of the Bush administration. Prior to his election as Vice President, Dick Cheney, then CEO of Halliburton, in a speech at the Institute of Petroleum in 1999, demonstrated a keen awareness of the sensitive economic and geopolitical role of Middle East oil resources, saying, quote, by 2010, we will need on the order of an additional 50 million barrels a day. So where's the oil going to come from? Governments and national oil companies are obviously controlling about 90% of the assets. Oil remains fundamentally a government business. While many regions of the world offer great oil opportunities, the Middle East, with 2/3 of the world's oil and lowest cost, is still where the prize ultimately lies. Even though companies are anxious for greater access there, progress continues to be slow, unquote. The Vice President led the work of a secret energy task force, as described in the article below, a task force that focused on, among other things, the acquisition of Iraqi oil through developing a controlling private interest in said oil.